Good afternoon, everybody, and ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining. Welcome to this webinar on sustainable models for GLAMs, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. We're now 91 participants. It's a big number. I'm really pleased that you are all joining us. Please note that the recording is in progress, as you might have seen from the pop-up message on your screen. My name is Hinano Spreafico. I work for REA, the European Research Executive Agency of the European Commission, and I'm the project officer in charge of monitoring the implementation of the three projects that have organized this event today. Three projects are LibrarIN, GLAMMONS, and ReCharge. This is the first meeting that this cluster of projects is organizing. These projects were all funded under the call of Horizon Europe program about the new ways of participatory management and sustainable financing of museums and cultural institutions. And this is a very important topic, as we can see from the number of you attending today, but also because of there is a high interest in the results of these projects among the sector community, but also at policy level. And the call was published in 2021 after the COVID pandemic, and it was a way to support the museums and the cultural and creative industries and sectors who were, as you know, heavily affected during the pandemic. There was a pressing need to ensure methods of sustainable financing for cultural sector and to help, especially in recovering quickly and try to operate in a safe and viable way, ensuring access to citizens. But at the same time, this crisis highlighted the importance of the cultural sector, both for our society and for the economy. Indeed, the cultural sector helped people cope with the impacts of the lockdown, and this sector showed that it is a strong asset for Europe and important for Europe's sustainable recovery and for a resilient European society and more generally for our European way of life. All these three projects started around October, November 22, and will close around October 25. So they are now after running for about for more than a year, a little bit more than a year, and they will still run for 1 year and a half, more or less. The purpose of today's meeting is to share the first outputs that these projects produced after this first year of implementation and raise awareness of their activities and objectives. So it's great to see you all connected and interested in this topic. Now let's hear more about what's in the agenda for today. So I give the floor to Ares Kalandides from the project GLAMMONS, who will go through the agenda for us. Thank you all again, and we are very looking forward to listen to the exciting presentations from the members of the consortium.
Thank you very much, Hinano. Welcome to everybody. It is very exciting to have so many people participating in such an online webinar. As Hinano said, that shows how much interest there is. What we have is we have a program of approximately 2 hours. We'll be very punctual in finishing at 3 o'clock as it's planned, Central European time. And the whole idea is to start with a presentation of the three projects. So we'll start with GLAMMONS, we'll move on to ReCharge, and then LibrarIN, 10 minutes each. And then we'll go into a more discussion format when we'll come again and talk about all the things that you heard in the first part. You can all participate by using the Q&A. You will find the Q&A button. Feel free to ask questions. We will make sure that we will take those questions and we'll be able to answer them in the open discussion afterwards. During the 10-minute sessions of the introduction, this will understandably probably not be possible. but we'll make sure that panelists know about your questions and they're ready to answer it. As I said, the first part, 10 minutes presentations, and I will start directly with Vasilis Avdikos, who is going to talk about the project GLAMMONS, where I also participate. GLAMMONS, resilient, sustainable, and participatory practices towards the GLAMs of the commons. Vasily, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Ares. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. It's really nice to have those three projects and discuss among us, discuss with people, practitioners, policymakers from the field. I'm going to go through a very brief presentation of the GLAMMONS project. So the GLAMMONS project involves something like 8 European partners. 3 of them are universities, the other are practice partners. And the main aims and objectives of the project is, first of all, to go through the ongoing shifts in GLAMs with a specific focus on, the pandemic-driven transformations, but also the waves of digitalization of the last few years in the field of GLAMs, and do an analysis and evaluation of all of these ongoing shifts, but also and mainly explore and assess different kinds of practices like management practices, participatory management practices, or finance practices that have emerged around mainly small-scale community-led GLAMs, but also would like to use this knowledge and also try to transfer the relevant knowledge to more established and traditional GLAMs to provide more sustainability to the sector. And we do this through the conceptual and theoretical approach of the commons. So the commons as a concept and as a practice has been emerging the last few decades, and it really provides a solution for managing natural, urban, and intangible resources in a more collective, democratic, and inclusive way and manner. And of course, responding to contemporary social, economic, and environmental challenges. So we've got the commons as an alternative to, the public, but also the private ownership and control of the market. And we think that, GLAMs can fall into the category of the new commons, having as well characteristics primarily from the cultural and the heritage commons, but also of other kinds of commons like the urban and the digital commons. And what we say is that we see GLAMs as open terrains, open social systems, where various and different components come together, and as they are assembled into a self-governed community. So we are looking at the communities of the GLAMs that have a shared interest over the protection and dissemination of the common cultural heritage resource. And in order to go through this adventure, we search a lot in the commons literature in order to find an adequate theoretical schema, a conceptual schema, to view GLAMs as commons. And actually, we have come with this schema that is on your screens right now, that has 3 different levels or 3 different principles, as we say, where commoning practices are performed. So we say that, commons-oriented GLAMs usually have a more horizontal decision-making process that usually entails assemblages of the community, while also the community owns the archive, the library, or the museum. And usually the legal forms implemented in such initiatives are associations, cooperatives, charities, NGOs, etc. The next level, the level of the autonomy, is the one where most of the challenges in GLAMs operations are found today. And this is the level of securing the autonomy of the organization against several dependencies from either market forces like private donors or patrons or the state. And what we say is that commons-oriented GLAMs need to find the right balance to secure the resources that are needed for the organization to keep performing, while also, maintaining relations with the market and the state. And also, what we see in the field is that many commons-oriented GLAMs usually they try to secure levels of their autonomy by relying a lot on volunteering labor from their community. Some others use other kinds of networks to secure resources, like networks with other commons initiatives like the urban commons or the digital commons. And the third level, the third principle is the level of openness and accessibility of GLAMs, where we find usually, co-creation processes and practices, and also the possibility for the audiences to actively participate in shaping the outputs through co-exhibitions, co-curating practices, etc. So the audiences gradually are transformed from passive audiences to very energetic and active participants. So the question is, are all the above levels, all these three principles, to be found in most of the GLAMs? Probably not. There are very few organizations that operate as commons per se. But what we see in the field is that there are a lot of GLAMs that have actually internalized and currently use common practices from all these different levels. So for us, a key difference is actually the location of these common practices and whether these give an advanced role to the community to decide upon the matters that are most crucial for the organization, for the institution. And what we see is that usually, smaller and more community-oriented GLAMs may have kind of greater flexibility in adopting commons like governance. So we see them entering that schema from the bottom, whereas larger organizations like big public sector institutions, large museums, or even private museums usually engage with co-creation common practices, either through digitalization processes, but also through citizen or community participation. So they are entering that schema from the top. One implication of mapping common practices and also their entry points in the schema is actually providing GLAMs professionals with the resources which could aid in promoting the proliferation and expansion of common practices within cultural organization. And our conceptual framework challenges us to reimagine GLAMs as very dynamic and participatory commons which thrive or can thrive on community engagement and enable this kind of engagement to become more meaningful participation. So this very first perspective invites also, heritage and cultural professionals to further help unlocking the past in a way that truly belongs to the present and its people and the communities around. So thanks very much for the opportunity to present the project. We invite you to go through our website and go through also our deliverables that the first year deliverables are going to be uploaded to the website in the next few weeks. And also with the other three projects, as well as from our point of view, we're going to organize more webinars and more, dissemination, other dissemination means to engage with you and learn from the field. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, thank you very much, Vasilis, and thank you for keeping the time. Just a reminder to everybody, because you were asked, this is being recorded and you will see it on social media and you will see it on the web pages of all three projects, because we had that question. We'll move on to the second project, which is ReCharge, Resilient European Cultural Heritage as Resource for Growth and Engagement. And Trilce and Navarrete will present it for us, just reminding Trilce about our time constraints. Thank you.
Thank you. I cannot start my video, so if I could have some support on that, please. In the meanwhile, I'll set up my slides.
Okay, let's see what happens with the video.
So if it's going well, you can see now my slides.
Yes, we can see your slides.
Great. So you see the picture in my profile, so that should be enough. So thank you very much for having the opportunity to share with the three sisters here together on how do we have a different approach to participation. ReCharge is next. And let's see how I can change slides. Yes. So what is ReCharge? ReCharge is the resilient European cultural heritage as resource for growth and engagement. ReCharge is actually a response to what we see in that cultural heritage organizations are very good at generating value. However, as Hinano has mentioned in the introduction, there's a problem with the current context for institutions to capture back this value. And we believe that the key to this proposition is participation. And so our project is driven by the core question, how do we use participation as a driving force for cultural heritage business models for cultural heritage institutions in Europe? We have a most fantastic consortium from very active members from different countries in Europe. You can see here the institutions, Platonic Foundation, Creativity Lab, Maritime Museum from Estonia, University of Valladolid, Erasmus University, the Han Museum in Ireland, European Fashion, Heritage Association, Museum del Tessuto, Sound and Vision, and the Cyfrowe Foundation. So, what is our project about? At the core, we have what institutions generally do. This is a general model that we can present to say that cultural heritage institutions are, broadly speaking, driven by the collections. And so we have in the value chain, first moment of acquisition. Then we have some activities related to adding value to this acquisition, which have to do with documentation, with research, with design, and others. And then we have what we call, from an economic perspective, the multi-output that characterizes these cultural heritage institutions. The old definition of museums identify these 5 core activities: collection, exhibition, research, preservation, education. But we know that there's more. So we have also the ancillary activities like the museum shop. And with the new museum definition, we have also a societal role. Further on in the value chain, we have the whole marketing campaign and PR and these sorts of things. To end in visits to our exhibits or purchases to our goods and services and engagement with the society, the consumers, to lead to a final social benefit. Now, where is participation here? Looking carefully, we actually see that cultural heritage institutions have a history, a big tradition on participation. Here I will focus on the museum, but I know the same holds for archives and libraries and other forms of cultural heritage institutions in one way or another. So for instance, acquisition. We have the Friends of the Museum. These are institutions with very, very ancient, some very small. The Louvre is super big. And we know that they are responsible for contributing to the acquisition of collections in the museum. They're not part of the museum staff, but still they have an important role in engaging and adding value to this chain. We have then documentation, research, and design. An example can be identified in interns. These are scientists from the university who are maybe at bachelor level, maybe at high school level, maybe at PhD level or beyond, that are contributing to the research of collections from outside of the institution, again, to add value to these activities. We then have, for instance, in the example of exhibitions, different institutions that make a traveling exhibit, so they make the thing, yet the museum might benefit from hosting this traveling exhibit. Marketing, the same, we can consider word of mouth. And for volunteers, we can consider, for visits and engagement, we can consider volunteers. These are generally our first point of contact with our visitors. On the additional core activities like societal role, we have several societal institutions that have taken role. Now, if this already happens, why are we here? Now, we believe that this model of value, let's say, contributing to value, or value participation, can be bottom-up or top-down, but still is not integrated. We believe that we are here to make sure this participation is integrated in the value creation in order to enable the institution to make the most out of these participatory practices. How do we propose to go ahead? So we propose a recipe. We have these main, let's say, actions, which are systematic and are, let's say, fixed. So we have a preparation phase, a co-designing phase, implementation phase, and reflecting phase. And these phases are, let's say, what you use when you're making pasta. Now you have to boil the pasta, boil the water, and all these steps. You cannot skip them. However, you have variable ingredients. What kind of pasta? Like the who, the how much, and the what. How are you involving your participants in this? We have chosen in the ReCharge project the Living Labs methodology. And this you see in the bottom left of your screen, that help us bridge these phases, because we believe that will support and facilitate the assurance of this systemic approach of that is iterated. So we have a co-creation, a monitoring, and an evaluation. On the right model, you see actually other critical success factors that we believe are integral to our model. And this is where we are right now testing. We have a first generation Living Labs, 3 institutions from which you will hear in a minute. And we will have 6 other second generation Living Labs to sort of continue testing our model and continue improving our proposal. Gains on this participatory investment will be, as you will hear in a minute, documented to have clear evidence to show how this participatory integral model that we are proposing, following this recipe with fixed phases and with variable ingredients. You will hear later on as well about these KPIs. We propose this is at the core of our ReCharge model. And with that, and looking at the clock, I thank you for this, and I give the word back to our Ares, our moderator. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Trilce. This was fantastic, and just in time, together with GLAMMONS from earlier, we already have a couple of graphs to lead us, and we see how important they are in visualizing everything. I'd like to remind all our audience that this is being recorded, which means that you can watch it again. And I would also like to remind you all that you have the possibility to use the Q&A button to ask any questions that we will then be able to feed into the discussion we're having afterwards. The third project is LibrarIN. And I would like to ask the 2 speakers, Luis and Andrej, to come and present. LibrarIN's value, co-creation, and social innovation for a new generation of European libraries. The floor is yours. Can we unmute? Yeah, you would need to unmute yourself, Luis.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? And can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see the presentation, but it's not in presentation mode.
Yeah, let me see. Now?
Now it is, thank you.
Is it better? Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you for organizing this and for inviting me to represent LibrarIN, this project that I think very well complements the previous two ones we have been talking about in this webinar or seminar. We're going to give you a first some insight. So what is this project about? The first slide represents the two types of libraries that we have nowadays in our European society. We have this lot of nice traditional books-oriented libraries, like the one in the picture to the left, that are basically devoted to individual knowledge acquisition. So readers go there and they get knowledge and other things as well, but books and knowledge was kind of the key thing in the whole libraries. The new libraries are not that way. They still have this kind of setup, many of them, but the libraries are moving to more kind of modern users and co-productive oriented services with a social dimension in which libraries can perform new functions through new or improved services and processes. So it's really, the picture is totally different. Of course, still books in that library, but the things are different. So this acquisition of new libraries, really new services, so started after the boom of internet in 2000 in particular. So many libraries are now trying to move towards a new sense of raison d'être, using this French term. I think that in this context, value co-creation matters, because in this transition from all model based on books to a new model based on people, basically, on the new services delivered to people, the co-creation aspect matters a lot. It's essential, really. So LibrarIN is a project about participatory management again. So like the previous projects as well, but with a focus on the new services and functions the libraries can perform and are already performing. Some of them we are meeting some libraries that are doing amazing things in this direction. But of course, they get to develop managerial and policy recommendations, so some of the existing experiences in the libraries can be scaled up to wider areas and be visible for so the whole wall of libraries can really look at what is really working in this direction. So the objectives of the project, well, we have 6 objectives. First, we are establishing a kind of holistic theoretical framework in which libraries can be also part, just making a link with the GLAMs project. I think libraries can be also built not only for knowledge, but for holding and commons, in the sense that GLAMs.
Luis, sorry, we're having an issue with your sound. Can you, for some reason, it comes and goes. I don't know. Can you check it for a second?
Okay, I'm very sorry.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. It's just that it sort of moves away. You sound fine right now. You sound fine right now. So if you stay with that, we're fine. We're happy.
Okay. Let's see if I can maybe try to speak closer to the micro, perhaps.
I think that would help. Thank you.
Okay. So The objectives are these ones that you can see in the slide. So we want to build a holistic theoretical framework to understand this concept of innovation and value co-creation for libraries. We also want to measure transformative innovation in public libraries, and we have a survey that is now under design and ready to be launched very soon. We have a focus on 3 areas of transformation within public service co-creation in libraries. These 3 co-creation areas are living labs. So we also hear about living labs before in the ReCharge project. So we also have a focus on living labs, and then a colleague of us will talk about this in the second round later today. And we'll have a focus on digitalization, of course, of the new technology, artificial intelligence, etc. That is a big challenge for libraries. And we have also another focus on social entrepreneurship, public-private third sector innovation networks, and social entrepreneurship. That is also very, very important. And then we also have, we want to generate sustainable impact in library policy and practice. So we want to do something that remains after the project ends. And we have some instruments for that. We want to establish an online tracker system for the benchmarking of library value co-creation. We are working on that. We have other activities in the area of knowledge transfer and sustainability. And also we want to explore the achievements of the library project through a kind of sustainable research and innovation lighthouse that we may perhaps explain more in the second. So we have 3 things we want to do: theoretical framework, innovative and methods, policy recommendations into it. Perhaps, Andrej, you want to add something on the activities with the stakeholders, panel, etc. And then, so I give the floor to you, Andrej.
Yes, thank you, Luis. Hello also from my side. I'm Andrej Vrčon, and I come from LIBAR, which is a network of 450 research libraries. We have an important role in this project with the engagement of stakeholders, and our engagement with the stakeholders is basically threefold. Firstly, we engage through stakeholder panel. The panel facilitates information sharing and knowledge flows between researchers, practitioners, and policymakers to ensure sustainable impact. Panel members provide insights and feedback, and they participate in idea co-production on value co-creation and result validation. The stakeholder panel is composed from 32 stakeholders now, and they range from academic libraries, national libraries, municipal libraries, community and special libraries, international library associations, policy and civil society representatives. The second activity is dashboard and toolkit and co-creation session. So all 3 dashboard and toolkit is to shift the design and implementation paradigms towards the more human-centered design. So we are placing citizens in the center of our process. And the third is the use of use cases. So we foster knowledge sharing and collaboration among researchers, practitioners, and policymakers, ensuring sustainable impact. So Luis, if you can move on to another slide. Yes. And here are our partners, project partners. So the LibrarIN Consortium is formed by internationally recognized academics, researchers, and managers of co-creation and innovation areas. So the consortium is well balanced, and we have 10 European partners from 9 different countries. So Greece, Spain, Belgium, France, Netherlands, Denmark, Germany, Finland, and Austria. The consortium is composed of 5 universities. So University of Alcala, Lille, Constance, and Maastricht, and 2 research centers, one think tank, and one SME, which is actually a leader of the project, so ATC from the Athens. And that would be all from my side. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we as for the first round, I think we are done. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Luis. Thanks very much, Andrej. I see that we already have a couple of questions in the Q&A, which we will be able to take afterwards in the discussion. We're moving to a slightly different format right now, because we've had the presentation of the three projects and where we are. I would like to ask Janet Merkel from TU Berlin to introduce the multiple financial channels of GLAMs and to chair a Q&A that may come there. Janet, are you around?
Yes, I am. I just get a lot of pop-ups that ask me to do something.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Fine. We can see you, and we can hear you.
That's fine. So let's see if you can see my presentation.
We can see your presentation.
I just need to go to... I think we're set, right?
Great. We've got you.
All right. Hello, and also a warm welcome from me for all of you who attend this webinar. As I said, I'm Janet Merkel, and I represent the TU Berlin team here within the GLAMMONS project. My background is in urban sociology and in cultural production and culture work, and the relationship with cities. And within the GLAMMONS project, more or less, our work packages are centered around understanding the financial practices of GLAMs. And when I speak of financial practices, I mean actually different types of income and funding that can sustain a cultural organization. And we're interested in those financial practices for several reasons. First of all, I think that's no news that the financial resilience of GLAMs is a very important subject in today's cultural policy environment, especially if you consider that we just had two major crises in the last 15 years. First, the financial crisis of 2008, and then the COVID-19 pandemic. And both had significant impacts on the structure of cultural funding. Where we, for example, have seen after the financial crisis 2008 that governments were much more keener on enabling more private funding. They introduced tax incentive schemes, so to incentivize donations and sponsorships by companies, but also by private people. And they also introduced austerity policies in many countries, which diminished public investments in culture, most prominent in Greece and in the UK. After the COVID pandemic, and after we've seen those massive investments during the pandemic, it's not quite clear yet what the direction is. We see already lots of spending cuts, but we also do not see a kind of dominant policy discourse right now, which describes a favored solution, as we've seen after the financial crisis, right? What I find in the literature review or in the documents is an emphasis on the role of public funding with complementary funding. So it's not necessarily one particular direction. The second reason or interest that we have here is to understand whether what the impacts of the financial challenges are, and whether those actually led to shifts in the organizations. For example, did they change management practices, which we know from private participation in many museums that people got seats on the boards. We've also seen that the role of public finance is very much shifting, that subsidies are changing, and that we see more and more a move away from direct support to an intermediary role, where public facilitates new instruments such as funding or arts investment funds. We see more of a mixed economy and multi-stakeholder approaches, an emphasis on partnerships and alliances to create these new financial ecosystems for cultural organizations. We also see that there's not really a distinction anymore in many instruments between what is public and what is private, and they combine a grant, a debt, and an equity way of financing. And we also see that most of these financial solutions are highly contextual. and very much depend on the wider political economy of these countries. A specific interest that we have within the GLAMMONS project is also to look in differences concerning to spatial context, to see whether there are significant differences between core regions like the metropolitan regions and non-core regions. So for example, we know that there are differences between the European countries in the West and in the East in terms of funding, but we also see significant changes between what is funded on the more local and small towns, but also in comparison to what is happening on the metropolitan level. However, there's very little research on the role of GLAMs and sort of how the financing of GLAMs in these different contexts change. And the third point here for us is that we introduce something new conceptually, and this is our specific lens of the commons, and where we want to understand whether there are financial practices that actually opening up commoning in existing GLAMs, or how GLAMs that were set up as commons try to sustain themselves, and whether we can learn something significant here. And usually what happens in policy papers, you see that they usually ask for market-based solutions. There's very little actually on community-based solutions, and those play very little role in cultural policy debates. But we assume that those community-based financing models might have an enormous potential for the emancipation of capital, but also the democratization of culture in GLAMs. However, and I guess that's no news to everyone who's attending, is there's quite a lack of data and also a lack of knowledge on financial practices of cultural organization. And whatever government level you look at, there's huge gaps, but also we know very little across the GLAMs for the different types of sectors in the GLAMs, which presents quite a challenge, and which we deal with by going for case-based research approach in the end, because the bigger databases aren't there yet that could give us an indication what happened and what specifically happened after the COVID-19 pandemic. What we find is that there are many instruments already in place that are used, and that we have this mixed funding economy of GLAMs. So it's not just public support, it's also private support, and it's a lot in terms of self-finance, so where personal resources are used to set up GLAMs or to sustain them, or where income has become an important contribution to this financial ecosystem that sustains these organizations. There's less on these more finance-based, like equity finance or debt-based financed instrument, but those are a lot promoted right now, especially in relation to the development of culture and creative industries, less so in relation to cultural organizations. However, we don't know much about how that trickles down into concrete organizations. And what we did was an exploratory survey that could give us more of an indication in what direction we should look. And just give you one example from the findings is here, the overall results. We managed to have 223 organizations that responded in this survey and gave us an indication how or different types of fundings that they have. And you can see a majority still uses and relies on public subsidies, but there's a lot of variety in terms of private fundings they use, whether that comes from companies, private people, or it comes from grant-giving organizations. But there's also a lot of earned income. And there's also nowadays a lot of alternative funds, such as crowdfunding, public-private partnerships, or commons partnerships in what supports these organizations. And we've also seen that there is community-based financing, right, like membership, or friends and societies that support continuously a particular organization, and where we want to look more closely into these types of funding. So this is kind of like what I'm going to do the next 2 years, and what I'm really interested in understanding financial practices for commoning in GLAMs. And as Vasilis already said, we have a particular understanding, a more constructivist understanding of commons, where we see them as socially constructed through specific collaborative, organizational, and institutional arrangements. So where a great variety of resources can actually be commonized. Yeah, what it needs is a community of people that become these commoner and that constantly care for this resource. And what we can differentiate in terms of our research field is basically two modes of commenting in GLAMs that will be interesting to explore. One is commenting strategies within existing GLAMs, and I think this is the more difficult one. So here it's about imagining and creating shared resource within existing organization and to see what types of funding might open up these type of commenting strategies, right? What type of fundings might enable spaces of commenting here. And the second one is about GLAMs created as commons. So this is something that has a long history. This is usually more smaller organizations where we can look and try to understand how they have, or what type of financial practices they have used to sustain themselves in the long term. And this is more or less based on economic sociology thinking, you know, where we try to understand financial practices as social practices and how they can enable particular type of relationships, always how people create value and meanings with each other. Just to give you an idea, kind of like a first mapping of the field of instrument that exists according to two dimensions that could be considered as important when I think about commenting structure or commenting practices, right? The research literature is quite limited on understanding also how commons are financed. That doesn't seem to be of concern within that literature. But there's two things that are always highlighted. What we need is a repeated engagement over a long time from people, right? And not just a one-time contribution that could do something, but actually what is highlighted is more the repeated engagement. And we need an indirect social reciprocity as a commenting principle. So that means there should be little expectations on a return in value, right? And this is in comparison to a direct reciprocity where I actually have an expectation of getting something back that is in value of what I give. And if I start mapping the different instruments that we can find currently in use in GLAMs, you already see that there are some that might not be suitable to support commenting practices in GLAMs, but there are others that are much, much more usable or might be more used. And those are volunteering, the friends and societies are something we should look at, but also forms of crowd patronage and community fundings. And I think this is where I stop and invite questions and hopefully contributions from you. As I said, financing is not necessarily a big topic and reflection in cultural policy thinking. And there's very little case studies we can actually look at. So I'm hoping you might have inspiration or can tell us a bit about new ways of financing that your organization uses, or what types of financial shifts you have maybe experienced in your organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janet. Thanks for providing this dimension, because obviously financing is something that is relevant to all three projects, right? This is not just the GLAMMONS we're working in, but it's relevant in all the others. I already have some questions, and as the two next panels are going to concentrate a bit on the two projects, so the one will be on ReCharge and the other will be in LibrarIN. Let me just put in the question, especially because they refer to particular projects, and I think will be interesting to ask them. Something that is probably goes to both, but maybe ReCharge can start, because our next panel discussion is with Maja, Una, Kelly from ReCharge. We're going to talk about understanding and fostering participation in cultural heritage. And the question that I think is absolutely relevant here is first by Hans van der Bunte, who asks, besides success factors, are there critical risk factors taken into account and monitored while integrating participatory practices? For example, out of expertise, I find the quality of output to decline over time with an increase of participatory practices. How do we manage that? And secondly, funding body, especially some Dutch local governments, see participatory practices as cheaper options and a way to lower the institute's subsidy over years. So actually, there are three questions. Is how do we take those risk factors into account and how do we monitor them? How do we guarantee, let's say, the steady quality of output over time with participation? And how do we manage the expectations also of local governments that may see participation as a way to reduce costs? And there is a concept, a question that goes with that, is that somebody would be interested in hearing more experiences relating exactly to that issue of risk factors. Then we have the others is about LibrarIN. I think I will take it afterwards. There's also something for Janet. Janet, maybe you can start, because there are two that refer to you. I think the interesting to analyze the respective values of tangible and intangibles. I think that went to you. So maybe it would be value and time spent by volunteers. I don't know if you want, it's not really a question. It's just how it's interesting. Do you want to say something about that? It's more a comment than a question.
Yeah, actually. I see it. And I think it relates probably also to the other presentation. It's not just mine. For sure, this is very important, I think. And it also, I think, connects to the other comment that Katja Lindqvist posted.
Yes.
That of course, that there are different types of contributions.
Let's read it.
Or different types of...
Let me read it for everybody. Katja Lindqvist asks, I am thinking about the use of the term value in the graph on social reciprocity. Shouldn't the correct term be economic value or return? As cultural economists point out, the difference between economic and non-economic value of culture in society. So maybe you can start, and then the others are coming in two panels afterwards anyway.
I think it's very important to differentiate those, and maybe to Katja Lindqvist. I speak of indirect social reciprocity. This word is not coming out easily today. Reciprocity, because it is a bit more than just economic value. Economic value is one, but what it means here as a criteria to differentiate is how much people have an expectation of what they give is returned to them. And, you know, as a volunteer, do I have expectations that something is given to me in return for the time I invested here, for the time that I spent helping this organization? And it's different than, for example, in terms of the subsidies. You know, there's also not necessarily an economic value expected, but rather a contribution to society, whatever, you know, is sort of negotiated with the organization for giving the subsidy. So, and this will probably be much more differentiated later on when I have way more empirical material to draw from. But right now, this is sort of a very, maybe a simplistic way to starting to differentiate what type of instrument might be interesting to support commoning and based on existing commoning principles.
Okay, thank you, Janet. I see that Trilce wants to answer this too.
Yes, thank you. I get you can't start your video because the host. Voila. Thank you very much. Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'd like to answer the question of Hans. Thank you for this very interesting question. Agree that in the current expertise, as you mentioned, we might perceive a reduced quality in the output as the project goes on. However, in ReCharge, we see that when you engage within a living lab mind frame, you're engaging, let's say, for life or for the longer term. So that means that you are interested in building sustainable relationships that have to iterate from the beginning towards the end. And, you know, there's actually no end. And so the relationship that's built, we see it not as an iterative step of the glass, not like that you walk through your same steps over and over again. Nobody likes to do that. But there's always a change in this relationship. So let's say that using the case of the museum, you first decide to participate by going to the exhibition. And so you walk the exhibit, so that's first iteration. But then you decide that you like it a lot, so you take somebody with you. And then maybe you decide, and here there's a spiral change in your relationship with your museum, because maybe you decide to give a tour yourself to the visitors, like Blix Opener or some of the programs that facilitate this. And then maybe you decide to donate something to the museum. And I'm just talking about the old-fashioned, the traditional forms we're accustomed to for participation. Again, when you engage in a living lab participatory cultural business model, the idea is that together you decide, what do we want to do together? And then based on that, you start with this dialogue. You change the mindset of the entire institution as well as of the stakeholders. And then you together engage in this long-term process. And then, we'll see where it goes, because that's one of the things with our project. We depend on participation in our living labs. We don't know yet where we're going, but in a little bit, you will hear some of the great preliminary results that we have already seen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trilce. Louise, you could answer it now, but you are in the second panel too. So if you want, we can join. We can have this question. It's up to you. Do you want to answer it now, or do you want to take it in the discussion afterwards?
Well, I can. Thank you. No, I can do it later if you prefer. So
I think it makes more sense time-wise, right?
Sure.
Thank you. Thanks, Louise. So let's listen to Maja and Una first, and Kelly, who will talk about understanding and fostering participation in cultural heritage. And I think some of that will go directly into the questions that were asked. Questions of risk management, question of how also local governments sometimes deal with these things. So the floor is yours. And we have time until approximately 2:25. We're fantastic time-wise. Thank you all for keeping time.
Okay, putting the alarm.
And always remember that you have the Q&A. If you want to ask any questions, we will try to answer at the end. Thank you. So all yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Ares. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm already learning a lot. I'm Maja. I'm based in Warsaw, working for Centrum Cyfrowe, but today representing and speaking on behalf of ReCharge, together with my two colleagues, Una Hussey from the Hand Museum and Kelly Hazejager from the Nederlands Instituut for Sound and Vision. And within the time that we were offered, we want to invite you to take a kind of a deeper dive with us into participatory culture business models. We want to tell you more of what we do in ReCharge. We have an invitation to you all. We also want to share a bit of knowledge that we already gathered through this super intense and very interesting year. But because we like to we believe in what we do, and we really like to practice what we preach, we would like to start with you all and turning to you. And instead of using the Q&A button, I would like to ask you to join me in a Menti session. So I'm going to share my screen, and I think you can see it. So
we can see it, yes.
Thank you, Ares, for the confirmation. So I would like to ask you to join me at menti.com. I hope you know the tool. And you can do it using your mobile device, or you can use the desktop. And please join me at use the code. It's 27152192. I see that it's working. People are showing up. It's great. I would love to have more of you in the room. I literally have 3 questions, but we also, as ReCharge, we want to understand who you are. And I think we thought that this is the best way, allowing us to understand who was interested in this session and who is interested in discussing participatory business models and this shift that Trilce mentioned earlier. So the shift in the mindset, but I think also a big operational shift. So, okay, I see that we have 31 people joining. I'm conscious of the time, but you keep coming. Okay, I'm gonna start. we're going to move to the first question. And the first one is a really generic one, but I would love to understand, what does cultural participation mean to you? So it's an open-ended question. When you hear cultural participation, what does it mean? Okay. That's very interesting. It's about engagement, local community, free access to culture, co-creation, joint focus. That's a very interesting one. Okay, you're still typing in. So you can see the responses are very diverse, and this is exactly what we are also encountering in the ReCharge and LibrarIN. So and it was also one of the challenges for us in the project to understand what we really mean by cultural participation. But on the other hand, this is really the beauty of this concept, that we first need to meet and define and be in dialogue, as we are trying to do now. Okay, you see the big words are there: engagement, collaboration, creativity, community, but there is much more into this. Okay, thank you very much. Let's move to the second question. Then, on a personal level, do you take part in participatory processes led by cultural institutions? I think we might be biased in this group, but hopefully we are. Let's see. And now I'm really sorry that I won't have the chance to ask you, okay, why somewhat, what we mean exactly here. Again, the question's definitions, but it's really interesting to us to.
Maria, if anybody wants to add the why in the Q&A,
absolutely, by all means.
So can you rephrase your question?
Then the question is whether, if you could just justify your answer. Why yes? Why somewhat? Why no?
Okay. So anybody who wants to add it to the Q&A, please feel free to do so.
Thank you very much for the hint, Ares. Very useful. Okay. But see, the majority is involved, or to some extent involved in participatory processes. This is also very interesting to hear. And let's move to the final one. The final one is a bit longish. Apologies for that. But I think it's easier to read on your mobiles. I checked that yesterday. So what is the motivation driving your engagement? This is for those who said yes, or to somewhat, to some extent. Is it leisure? So if you could scale, like if you could kind of put scale for each of these. Why, to what extent leisure is a relevant motivation? To what extent social interaction? Is it about identity? Is it a personal well-being or knowledge? Or maybe it's the economic factor? So we have. I'm going to wait a bit longer because the answers are coming. I know that this is a bit timely, but these are very, like, already your answers are also shaping nicely in here, showing the diversity of approaches, the diversity of needs and motivations. And to build a bridge between this and what we do in ReCharge, these are exactly kind of questions that we are asking to the communities that we apps that we will introduce to you in a second. Okay, 36 people replied. So it's hard to say that there is a leader here, but I think social interaction, so the social value of engagement, social value of participation in culture, the question of identity and the personal well-being, we talk about it more and more when it comes to cultural practices. I think it's super relevant that we see them here as well. Okay, thank you very much for this exercise. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen. But as I said, so that was very useful for us to understand who you are and what your take on participation is. And now I would like to give the floor to Una to tell you a bit more about our approach and to share a hopefully interesting invitation to you all. And Una, I'll be happy to share the slides for you.
Thanks, Maja.
Just give me a second.
No problem. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me.
We can hear you, Una.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
The slides are coming. Yeah.
No problem. So the very first thing I would like to do is to introduce ReCharge Next, which is a call for proposals currently open until the 29th of February. This call is looking for 6 new cultural heritage institutions to test a range of participatory cultural business models in 6 new living labs. So on the next slide, Maja, we have 9 participatory models to choose from, proposed by ReCharge to be tested in these new living labs. So 3 have already been tested. So the revenue sharing model has been tested by our partner, the Estonian Maritime Museum in Tallinn. The corporate social responsibility cultural heritage community model has been tested by ourselves at the Hunt Museum in Limerick, Ireland, and the collaborative e-commerce model has been tested by the Museo del Tessuto in Prato, Italy. Now, even though these 3 have been tested, the ReCharge Next Living Labs are welcome to test these again. There are 6 more participatory cultural business models that have not been tested yet in ReCharge, including one hybrid model option, which can be a mix and match of elements of each of the above, or could be a completely new model. These 6 new living labs will be mentored by one of the 3 institutions who have already tested 3 ReCharge participatory business models in the living labs. Also to test on the next slide is a participatory business model canvas for cultural heritage institutions. Maja, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. As you can see, it's been inspired by the Osterwalder canvas. It has been recharged, however, to include levels of participation, to take into account social and environmental elements into the cost structure and revenue streams, and importantly, talking about the social value proposition, as well as the users being both customers and beneficiaries. To give examples of how the 3 museums above tested these participatory business models, the next slide gives an example of the Museo del Tessuto in Prato that tested the collaborative e-commerce model. With the social value proposition, museum e-shops are cool, edutaining go-to places for locally and ethically sourced, sustainability-oriented quality products. So engaging participants such as local designers, artisans working with sustainable or local materials or sustainable production, design schools, and small local museums in Tuscany, approximately 40 co-created, ethically and sustainably made museum-inspired goods are currently being sold in the e-shop established during the course of this living lab. The next slide then shows the Estonian Maritime Museum that tested the revenue sharing innovation model to jointly develop and own a museum app created by a software company and the museum to share both the risk and the reward. With their social value proposition, museums are valuable partners for collaborative innovation for digital innovators in education. Engaging participants such as young people, schools, teachers, and tech companies, a co-created educational app was developed, complementing the school curriculum in a new accessible way with using a storytelling experience. The Hunt Museum in Limerick, on the next slide, tested the CSR cultural heritage community model with the social value proposition, corporate social responsibility, working for culture and community to bring sustainable cultural heritage to everyone. Partners included local corporates, Irish museums, and a community local to the museum. And they were engaged in a co-creation and co-ideation of testing this model with a project called Weaving Willow, which engaged the corporate, museum and community in a heritage craft, celebrating biodiversity, bringing increased footfall to the museum and decreasing antisocial behaviour in the Hunt Museum garden. The next slide, so the ReCharge Next page on the ReCharge platform contains all of this information. I please invite you to share the information about the ReCharge Next call to any colleagues or partners who you think may be interested in becoming a living lab or testing the ReCharge recipe. We please invite feedback on all the various elements. The participatory cultural business model canvas is available here to download and experiment with. The business model shortlist with deeper descriptions of the 9 business models in the shortlist is here. And very importantly, the first version of the ReCharge Playbook, which we also welcome for testing, not only by next generation of living labs, but anyone who may wish to test participatory practices. I will hand over to my colleague Kelly, who will briefly take you through this first version of the ReCharge Playbook that these experiences from these 3 living labs has fed into so far in the project.
Thanks for the handover, Una. So I'll be giving a brief introduction to the playbook, the first version of it. We'll continue to develop it throughout the rest of the project and also add the experiences of the next generation of living labs. So the important thing that the playbook does is to capture all the knowledge that's been collected, developed in the project, and to share it in a really practical way. So with instructions, templates, explanations of the different theories and methods that we have used. So I also have a QR code here that you can use to access the playbook. And it includes a lot of information such as how to go about developing your own participatory cultural business model, the process of setting up a living lab, really detailed information about the 3 existing ReCharge living labs, examples of different participatory approaches that you can try out for yourself, and also a glossary of terms, because that's also something we've learned throughout the project and in the living labs, is that we talk about participation and business models without maybe explaining what exactly we mean. So that's also a key step for us. So Maja, if you go to the next slide, please. So the important thing that we try to do with the playbook is to, make sure that we're reaching people with different levels of experience with business models, but also different levels of experience with participation. So
if I may interrupt you for a second, Kelly, we have a message that the QR doesn't seem to be working. I wonder if anybody could check that while you're speaking. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No problem. I created the QR, so if it's not working, I think
okay, we'll
Maja
do it when you're done.
Put the link in the chat
okay,
later.
Fine. Thank you very much. That's all.
Or it's also on the website too. Sorry that that's not working.
Thanks for that. Sorry for interrupting.
No problem. So for in each, there's here a little screenshot of the table of contents, and you can read it through, start to finish. It's a very step-by-step process where we have instructions of how to go about these different elements of setting up your own living lab and creating a business model, and with a really great toolbox. So just to give you a bit of a visual preview, something that was also mentioned already by the other projects is that there's, for example, stakeholder mapping, where you have the more step-by-step instructions, but we also include checklists, specific exercises that you can use as an example, and templates that are just ready to use. Thanks, Mike. You can go to the next slide. And then, as I was saying, we want to make sure we're reaching as many people as possible. So we also explain some of the mindsets behind participation and recognizing when it's a good opportunity to think about developing a living lab in your organization and the purpose of creating a shared language. So this is, again, another preview. And if you could please go to the next slide, Maya. And then to also touch on what Una was saying about the participatory business models, these are also explained in the playbook with step-by-step processes and descriptions of how each of the living labs went about developing it for themselves. So that's it's much more practical to think about it. You don't have to start from scratch. There's structure, templates, reasoning. So one thing I want to highlight here is that we also describe what the purpose of completing a canvas can be, that it can help you perhaps in talking within your organization about the benefits of approaching it with a participatory mindset. It can also be used to communicate your project idea to the wider world. It can be used as part of a working process. And then Maya, if you go to the next slide, we have also then included specific methods. So perhaps many of you have heard of the World Cafe. We actually use this in our project to further develop the models that the 3 living labs were using. So the playbook, just to sum up, the playbook for us is really capturing this bringing together of research and practice, and then trying to share it as soon as we've gathered this information. So we hope that this tool can be of use to you, and we warmly invite any feedback for you to test it out. And I think Maya also has some questions for if you have specific things that you want to know about.
So thank you all very much for this. I had a couple of comments that indeed the QR and the link were not working, so it would be wonderful if you could just add it to the Q&A as an answer and people can see it. Otherwise, we'll also send it afterwards. So I think that it's possible to solve it.
We'll do it now.
I added in an answer. So if anybody wants to go to the answers part of the Q&A, there's a link to the playbook there anyway, for sure. Fantastic.
Thanks so much. And let me read some of the comments that I think were interesting while the 3 of you were speaking. And Martin, who was saying somewhat, to me means sporadically, most of the times with no continuity after the first couple of sessions. Then Hans was saying, in line with the EU Convention of Faro from 2005, to allow a more democratic process, our collection of Museum de Voorde was mainly built up by public donations. So isn't it right to engage the public in, for instance, the value of and the collective meaning of objects, the museum's narrative? And then by Dimitra, thank you so much for the info on this exciting call. ReCharge, great material as well. Does this call mostly address museums and GLAMs, or also small-scale cultural institutions as well? We're a non-profit institution promoting and safeguarding cultural architectural heritage, traditional building practices, working across participatory and hands-on methodology, locally focused. I'm wondering if we're eligible for ReCharge next call. Thank you. Could you try to answer that?
Una, would you like to take the final one?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, you are eligible.
It was a simple question.
Yes. Simple answer, simple question, simple answer. Yes, you are eligible. So even though, and we're trying to be so clear about this as well, even though the 3 living labs that have been tested in ReCharge so far have been tested by museums, this is a call open to all cultural heritage institutions, and certain nonprofits absolutely do qualify under our guidelines. The ReCharge platform with all the information on it, the link that was on the slide that I shared has all of that information. Do please have a look at the guidelines for more about that. But yes, you are eligible. Thank you for your question.
Okay. So I think we're done with this. And Suzanne says it all sounds encouraging, especially making things available with the playbook. Okay, great. Thank you very much for all 3. We know so much more about ReCharge now, and you already saw the interest of people to join. So that was very successful. Thank you. Let's move again to the other project, which that was LibrarIN. And I would like to invite again Luis Rubalcaba and Lars Fuglsang, Innovation in Libraries and Libraries as Living Labs, and talk about that. And as usual, we are happy to take your questions in a Q&A. Lars and Luis, you have until 2:50. Thank you.
Luis, I think you will start.
Thank you. Yes, Lars, I will start if I can switch on my video. No, it's not allowed. I don't know. Let me see. Okay. Yeah, and I'm going to also to share the presentation that we already had before. Okay. Share this here. No. Okay. Yeah. So I think we can start. I cannot show my video. I think that maybe the organizer should just allow me to start my video.
But I think it's fine at the moment, Luis. We'll get it done. You can start, and we'll get your video speaking. Thank you so much.
No problem. I start this way. Okay, so my idea is just to give some insights of the first results of the project, on some part of the project, and then Lars will focus on a particular aspect, that is the living lab aspect of the project. So you can also have something more detailed from him. So in my case, I will give you just some. Let me see now what happened. Yeah. Okay. So just you maybe can be a bit disconnected insights, but just I will try to connect some dots so you can see which kind of results we have in the project. No? Well, the first thing we have done is to do some literature reviews on public libraries, on academic libraries, different type of libraries with different topics. For example, this is something that you can see that what's going on. We want to see what's going on in libraries now. We were able to identify 5 main areas of services and new services that libraries are going into now. So first, there is a block regarding reading education. Then there is a block dealing with community services. Another area of interest in health and well-being services. Of course, a lot of creativity as well. And less important, this business and finance on entrepreneurship services. Some libraries are going to this, but not many. So you can see here five types of main services that are at the core of the transition, dynamic transition in libraries now. Here, another result. For example, you see that in the literature review, we have done systematic literature reviews to understand libraries from 3 perspectives. So libraries have physical spaces, libraries are digital spaces, and libraries are social spaces. And depending on the type of library, we see that the characteristics are different. For example, digital things are much more important in academic libraries than in municipal libraries. So and there is much more research on that because of this than on other types of libraries. So libraries have some commonalities, all type of libraries, but some of them really are different to others, especially in their own conception or things like that. So we also have done a quite extensive literature review of about 18,000 papers related to transformation in libraries. Most are concentrated to academic libraries, but this shows you that there is less attention in public libraries or in e-libraries. So the academic libraries bring most of the attention, maybe because academics, we are normally more, because it's easier for us to study our own institutions. No, in my case, I'm professor of economics at the Rubalcaba. We have a huge library, so it's normal that we start just pay attention to what we have close to us. No, but I see growing attention to other types of libraries and to other kind of dynamics. For example, here in dynamics, artificial intelligence is something very, very new, just starting, only 169 papers published so far on artificial intelligence in libraries, but this is growing, no? So just another example of what we are trying to capture, what is new, what is coming in the literature in different new areas. So just some lessons learned. For example, this one you have here, different language matter. I think the practitioners talk different language than us as academics or researchers. There is very little research in the area of economics, management, or even IT disciplines. More research is in information science and library journals. There is no really theoretical progress, no rigorous metrics in the library literature. So this area of metrics and conceptual progress is very limited. And of course, as I said before, libraries include very different types. So we are trying to cope with the heterogeneity in libraries, and this is something we want to do. And also, we think that this multi-agent framework, we call it multi-agent framework, which is a library ecosystem, so in which a library is supported by the librarians, of course, but also by the library users, policymakers, collaborators. All of them have their preferences, their competencies. So participation in libraries can be understood within a sort of ecosystem, library innovation ecosystem, as you can see here, where there are economic values, but social values, technological values, and political values. I wanted to profit also to answer one of the questions about what happens if participation leads to declining quality of output. So yes, participation cannot be taken for granted. Participation is always good. I think we are identifying different types of participation, intensities, methods for participation, and results, impacts on outputs is not the same depending on types or intensities or these capacities, competencies, and preferences. So in order to assess really the impacts of the participatory management, for example, in libraries, we need to identify well which kind of participation is going on. And depending on that, we may have one result to other. That's to answer to that very interesting question we had before. And now I stop here, and Lars, I think you can continue with your focus on living labs.
Okay.
And we're ready also to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Luis. Thank you very much.
So let's see if I can turn on my camera. Yes, my talk is it's on a particular aspect of the project. We have a work package focusing on different empirical aspects. One is digitalization, one is social innovation, and one is about the notion of living labs. Next slide, Luis. Will you change the slides for me? Luis has gone. Luis?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay, all right. Thank you. What we explore in this task here is the library as kind of an experimental participative setting where people meet and they develop things together. In a way, they innovate certain services. As you can see from these pictures here, the library today, it's not a quiet place, but it's a very lively space. Some people call it the new city hall, which means that it's a place where people are coming and often they can suggest certain things to the library staff and set in motion new initiatives. Next slide, please. So far we have made kind of a classical literature review to investigate what characterizes these libraries that are experimental participative spaces. So we made a search on scientific databases looking for articles that dealt with participatory methods and innovation and co-creation to see how they characterize this library. Next slide, please. And here are some of the findings that we have from the literature review. First of all, there's a great deal of attention given to the public library as kind of a public institution. It's for the common good. Its purpose is to create public value in the main. It could also be individual value, but public value is sort of the overarching idea for the public library. There's also emphasis on the inclusiveness of the library. It's about fostering cultural diversity. They are platforms for all kinds of civic participation, and they are available to all. Then there's emphasis on an emerging new typology of the library. Previously, the library was of course about books and information, supporting democracy by sort of focusing on books and other types of information. Today, there's kind of a new typology of library emerging as a cultural and social hub where different kinds of media are available for people, and where cultural activities, for example, are also considered as kind of media that people can use. Then the literature is also stressing innovation and co-creation. First of all, co-creating the library as a public space. That was also something Louis stressed before, that there's a lot of attention given to the space of the library as kind of a lively place where different people can come, and also the design of the space, the architecture of it, and also how people can contribute to develop and make the space lively. Then there's attention given to the library as service, you could say, as an institution that delivers a wide range of different services. It could be labor market services, education, language training. They have fab labs, they have weaving sessions and so on. They of course also have authors coming and lectures given. They also organize various kinds of cultural events and so on. And then finally, emphasis is also on the library as a democratic enabler. I think this is actually the main purpose given for the library, that it supports civic participation, the development of smart citizenships and so on, enabling people to take full participation in democratic institutions. Next slide, please. So we have come up with this framework here, where we try to look at the library in a way as a living lab. Of course, there are also living labs organized within the library, but you could say that in a certain sense the library functions as a living lab, or a living lab, you could say, a continuous room for experimentation and engagement of citizens, kind of a city hall where people can meet and suggest things, collaborate about service development. Then what we can see is that there's a great deal of discussion also about what does the library staff then do in the library, and how can library staff respond to this request of a more lively and co-creative library. So the main thing is that you could say that the library staff, they are supposed also to mediate or to sort of qualify the different initiatives that takes place in the library to be sure that these activities are directed towards some kind of public value creation, not just individual value creation. Next slide, please. So while we can see that there's this emerging framework of the library as an experimental space, at the same time it's competitive social innovation. There are different models, so to say, of it. And we have identified at least 3 different models of the library as kind of a living lab. There's one that tends more in the direction of a classical library, stressing reading. It could be children, it could be other types of special groups where focus is basically on books and reading. So that's one version of it. Another version is the community library. So we can find many libraries around Europe where, and mentioned in the literature, where the library has been turned into sort of a community space, focusing on social innovation, active citizen participation in the neighborhood, so integrated into the local community, and a driver of activities within these communities. Then there is sort of the very innovative library, like yeah, there are many examples of them. I think maybe mainly in the northern part of Europe, like Finland, Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, and so on. We can find these libraries that really state that they are extremely innovative. They have innovation in their strategy. They also mention co-creation and co-creation skills, and sort of they engage in long-term thinking about how the library of the future can look like. Next slide, which is my final one. So here's a kind of a conclusion. It's very preliminary because we haven't done the case studies yet. We have only conducted the literature review. We have started on the case studies. But I think we can say that there's an emerging understanding of the library functioning a bit like a living lab for social and public innovation. Its purpose is to address issues of democracy, social belonging, education, citizenships, and so on, through multiple types of innovation and multiple media, in a way. It's also competitive development with different models in play: the classic, the community, the innovative library. And there's also a question of, there's a skills issue. Not all libraries feel they have the skills for this. And there's, of course, also resistance towards developing the library in this direction. The staff, the public library staff, they qualify, or they mediate these innovative activities, directing them towards the creation of public value. As such, you could say that the library is potentially a transformative space because it's kind of already scaled up. There are libraries all over the place, so you could say that there's a potential, at least, for creating something transformative which has a general impact in society. But it still remains to be seen, actually, what goes on out there. So we really look forward to. We have started the case studies, and we look forward to look into the data and see what the different cases are telling us about the library as an experimental space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lars. Thank you very much, Louise, again. I have one question that is directly for you, Lars and Louise, which is, are any partners considering or already actuating the public space as a warm space for families to shelter in the cold winter when electricity may be too expensive? or as a course plate to come to in the heat of summer? I don't know, Lars and Luis, do you have any such examples?
Of the library as sort of a warm space where people can go?
In the winter.
Yes. I know that in Denmark, the libraries are open. Everybody can go there and during the weekend and so on. They just need to have a social security card, and there's no staff there. There was also an interesting example from Gothenburg, but that was a sort of a curiosity, sort of a strange case where they forgot to close the door in Gothenburg public library, and someone by accident tried to open the door and discovered that it was open, and then people started to go into the library during, I think it was a Sunday or a Saturday, where the library would normally have been closed. Mm-hmm. But it's an interesting question. We could definitely look more into that. Whether it could be...
I have two cases, Lars. I'll be happy to give them to you afterwards. We know a library in Berlin that consciously does it.
Okay.
One of the municipal libraries, and we know that the New Manhattan Public Library does it too. Yes, so this will be an interesting case to look into. Thank you very much for asking this question. This is by Susan, and thank you very much, Susan. Do we have any other questions? You can maybe stop sharing, Luis.
Yes.
So we can, And maybe this is a good opportunity for everybody to turn on their cameras again, because we're at the very end. See if we have any final questions and see if we can take them at this point. There is one question. Will you discuss, this is by Karen, will you discuss in your projects what the outcomes mean in terms of skills development for the heritage sector, and especially small institutions? And I think this mostly goes in the heritage sector, so we're talking here mostly about ReCharge. But it would be interesting for everybody because we all have some similar cases. So skills development. Who would like to say something about that?
I can start us off on this.
Yes, go ahead.
This is definitely a very conscious part of our project as well. So the playbook is the first step in doing this and trying to share these skills and really practical steps. But there's also, for example, an academy coming later in the project, which maybe Maja can tell more about. We're very aware of this difference between larger institutions, more people, and smaller institutions where maybe you're doing all of these tasks and activities between 2 or 3 people. So I would say keep an eye on what we're doing, and then we'll also be coming with more.
Yeah, so if I may build on this, yes, we are planning an academy, a summer school program for heritage professionals and other stakeholders interested in introducing more participatory practices in their work. And we, through the experience that we're going through now, we are gathering, like we are learning about a set of skills. And Trilce mentioned, and I'll keep coming back to that, the mindset and like what specific way of working with others. And we were asked about the quality and how to understand the value of the work, etc., etc. So these will be the themes we want to tackle upon during this week. We, of course, want to discuss the participatory culture business models, but exactly you need a specific knowledge to do that. So we hope to be able to offer that, but this is year 3.
We have 2 questions that both go towards the libraries. Have you encountered service designers in your library studies, their role, their use in Helsingborg public libraries? And the second one is, does co-creation in these libraries, suppose, happen through contacting the staff about ideas and initiatives, or can it actually be spontaneous and self-organized? That goes to the library people. So service designers was one, and whether ideas and initiatives can be spontaneous and self-organized.
You want Lars, you can go.
Yes, yeah, we have encountered service designers in libraries, mainly in those that we call type C libraries. Usually they are libraries in large, relatively large cities, and they have a very innovative strategy, and they employ designers. So definitely yes, we see that. And what was the other one? It was co-creation. Whether or not how if co-creation can be spontaneous.
Exactly.
Yes, that's what at least when we ask them in the case studies, we ask them whether people can organize activities themselves. Just a few days ago, I was in a library, and those that I talked to, they referred me to two users that had self-organized some services that I'm going to talk to quite soon. So this is possible, at least in some places. So there's a lot of we also we have really had difficulties in finding surveys on innovation. We have one work package on this. I'm not responsible for it, but we have been talking about it. And they couldn't find any metrics except one a survey was carried out in Denmark, and they could disaggregate it to the libraries. And one of the questions were whether users were drivers of innovation. And the survey, it showed that there was really a great deal of users that were, according to this survey, that drives innovation, which is an indication of this. A spontaneous co-creation in a way that users.
There is, however, a second thing about this question, which is, if I understand, people would need to contact staff about ideas and initiatives, right? Because they don't pop up and do it themselves without contacting somebody. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so, because they can't accept everything.
Yeah,
of course, they can't make sort of a kind of a bar or something like that in the library. So there are certain limits to innovation. It has to generate. So that's why the library staff plays an important role. And even if they sort of make it kind of a flat place in many libraries, they still have a reception as an indication that people have to turn to the library staff and in dialogue with them, because really important for the library staff that it is qualified as kind of a public activity and not just some fun for a few people.
What is interesting from my research, Lars, I'm looking at the new Manhattan Public Library at the moment. Okay, I know it's not Europe, so you're not looking at it, but in the new library, they have moved the reception away from the entrance. So they want this idea of the library as a public space, a continuity of the street, is very interesting, because that way they want to get people in the library. Then they will see the reception on the side, but that's not the first thing you see. So the street just continues, plus the entrance. And it's interesting, I'm talking to the architects next week. It's interesting because the way that the whole thing is designed is exactly the opposite of the old Manhattan Library. So it has nothing very, does not show any power and nothing at all. It's something very simple. You just go in from the street, and I'll be happy to share it with you.
Yeah,
Luis wants to add something.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this comment. Also, it's very interesting. I'm sorry, I cannot still switch on my camera, but anyway.
No worries.
Yes, no, it's just to tell that this also reminds me of the previous question on skills. These librarians, there's a huge gap between what's going on the training, the traditional training of librarians. All these needs for soft skills, for dealing with for all these changes in the library. Many people are really not trained that there is a need of skills able to cope with all these new things. So really, this is important, and this is one of the recommendations that will come from the project for sure, because there are a lot of things going on, and the programs and the degrees, the university degrees on information science, etc., miss a lot this kind of soft skills and also technological skills that are more necessary as well to cope with many of innovations. And one final thing, that some of the innovations are very good because they are able to generate networks and relationships among people. So it's not just that people can only organize themselves to do certain things, but is that the library staff, they can really promote the interactions among people, the free interactions among people. So this idea of generating networks between agents and between users is something that is happening, and it's very interesting, and it requires certain skills as well for the librarians.
I have one last question, and then we will have to wrap it up. And I would like to ask this to Vasilis, maybe, because I know a lot of that in GLAMMONS. Is there an idea on how authority shifts in the development processes of the participatory practice within an existing institution and among the stakeholders? How authority shifts in the development process?
I mean, the authority probably has to, if we're talking about traditional institutions, probably we must be ready to devolve some of the power to the people. And then it really becomes participatory, not only participatory, processes of co-creation, etc., but also participatory management. And we do have some evidence on this, meaning that through our survey, we had something like 10, 15 of these kind of institutions. They invite people in their board of directors. They invite people in their assemblies, and they do this kind of participatory management along with what we do call traditionally the audience. And I think that, the three projects have common areas, meaning that we are looking at, alternative ways of participatory processes. We're also looking at the value of, volunteering labor, which is something very, very interesting because people find it creative, to go engage with a library, engage with, a museum. And then if you're looking at the libraries are becoming more a kind of social infrastructure for cities. And if you look outside the big cities, then you find more and more these kind of social infrastructures that, they are there, that try to connect people, to bring people together. So we are talking about other kinds of values, more social values in GLAMs. And I think that we need to redefine probably the framework and the policy framework in order to acknowledge all these new developments. So probably we have to think out of the box and acknowledge that, there are diverse economies over there, there are new things happening over there, and we need to, follow all these new developments and provide also kind of policy recommendations, or at least bring all these issues on the table when we are, discussing with policymakers, either in the EU level or more localized policy arenas. Thank you very much. It was really useful for us, I think, this one, and probably we need to do it again and again with the three projects. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for participating in this webinar about sustainable models for GLAMs. Thank you, all participants for the three projects, GLAMMONS, ReCharge, LibrarIN, and thank you all for being with us, for asking very interesting questions. As we said, this session was recorded, and everything will be uploaded to social media and to the websites of the projects. Thank you very much, and have a good afternoon and evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.